What's up, everyone? Daniel Multz here. Welcome to episode 2 of 20 Minutes with Multz. Got a huge episode in store for you today. We're going to recap the Giants and Jets' huge wins in NFL Week 5. We're going to recap the MLB Wild Card round, looking at the 4 series, who won, who lost, and now we're going to preview who they're going to face in the Division Series matchups. And we're also going to take a deep dive into the American League Division Series matchup between the New York Yankees and the Cleveland Guardians, as well as me giving you my brief predictions for the other 3 series between the Braves and the Phillies, the Astros and the Mariners, and the Dodgers and the Padres. All that's coming your way over the course of this video. If you like what you see, please leave any comments below, positive or negative. I want all the feedback from you guys. And as always, like and subscribe. Now let's dive right in. Let's start things off across the pond in London, where my New York Giants took down the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers 27-22. On the defensive side of the ball, there's a lot of things to like. O'Shane Ximines and Dexter Lawrence really stealing the show in the pass rush, both racking up a sack in this one. Big Dex thriving at that nose tackle position with 3 sacks already on the year. The 342-pound wrecking ball not missing a beat with Leonard Williams out of there, and with the edge rush presence not being quite what it needs to be. Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari were expected to be this 1-2 punch of outside linebackers that would anchor the Giants' defense for a decade. Well, so far we're 5 games in and they've only played 1 single game together. Now, Thibodeau was good in this game, but it was Lawrence and Ximines stealing the show. Additionally, the secondary, watching Xavier McKinney just run free in that deep backfield, shutting down every deep pass Aaron Rodgers tried to make. All 6 of them just further proves that he should have never fallen to the Giants in the second round of the 2020 draft, and that they have got themselves a stud in that secondary. And he really had to step up with Aaron Robinson already out and Adoree Jackson hurting his knee in the game. Somehow, despite the very depleted defense and some weaknesses, especially at inside and middle linebackers, the Giants got it done on defense, shutting down Rodgers, pressuring him constantly, making him need to throw that ball in 2.5 seconds or less at least a dozen times. All things you love to see, including what goes on offense as well. Watching Mike Kafka scheme to fit this offense, which is also really depleted of talent, is so impressive. The double and around with Daniel Bellinger scoring a touchdown, and boy, what an impact he's been having in his first few games since he's taken the field. Saquon Barkley scoring another touchdown, taking snaps from the Wildcat, and being involved in the passing game. When you don't have Kadarius Toney, Wan'Dale Robinson, or Kenny Golladay, and you have to rely on Richie James, Darius Slayton, and David Sills to lead your receiving corps, the odds should be way against you. But Slayton stepped up big time, catching 6 or 7 targets for 79 yards. Daniel Jones put a few good runs in there, didn't make any mistakes, and just did his job. And the offensive line showing improvement for another week. Andrew Thomas is still the highest rated NFL football player. To think 2 years ago, nobody liked him at the pick at number 4 from the Giants. Now, nobody seems to be saying that because he's playing like the best left tackle in the NFL right now. All told, the Giants improved to 4-1. That's their best start since they went 5-0 to start 2009. Somehow, some way, they keep getting the job done. It's really a testament to Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen, the coaching staff they've put together, the culture they've built in that organization. You really couldn't ask for a better start, and it's only a shame that because they don't have the tiebreaker with Dallas and Philly is 5-0, that the 4-1 Giants are in 3rd place in the NFC Beast through 5 weeks. The Jets picked up an equally huge win over their division rival Miami Dolphins in a 40-17 blowout. And there were 2 huge positive takeaways for the Jets on offense in this game. One was Dwayne Brown, 37 years young, coming off IR to start every single snap at left tackle. Him and that O-line unit allowed just 1 sack in this game on Zach Wilson. Brown was a huge part of that. He was brought in for this very reason, to be an anchor of that O-line, which is otherwise pretty young. With Mekhi Becton being out, the veteran had to step up, and boy did he in this game. And here's the other one, the ground game. Michael Carter and Breece Hall combined for over 200 scrimmage yards and 3 total touchdowns, plus Zach Wilson and Braxton Berrios each had a rushing touchdown too. That's 5 in the game against Miami for the Jets. A huge success. And think about this too. Carter and Hall are a real 1-2 tandem at running back in the NFL, a trend that has exploded over the last few years. Think about these other tandems. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon in Green Bay, Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison in Minnesota, Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson in New England, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in Cleveland, Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard in Dallas, and there's others too, but now Michael Carter and Breece Hall belong in that conversation too. On defense, the secondary led by Sauce Gardner, Michael Carter II, and Jordan Whitehead made things really tough for Skylar Thompson, the rookie quarterback out of Miami who had to step in after Teddy Bridgewater suffered a head injury for the Dolphins. Thompson and that offense really couldn't get much going in the air. Tyreek Hill didn't have any big plays, nor did Jalen Waddle. The only positive on offense for the Miami Dolphins was Raheem Mostert rushing for a touchdown and over 100 yards at the tune of over 6 yards per carry. He might be 30 years old, but he's continuing to prove how fast he is and how talented he is. So far, he has stayed healthy for the Miami Dolphins, which is less than what could be said for him in his last few years when he was in San Francisco. And the big couple of takeaways here for the Jets as a whole, they're 3-2, and they're getting healthier with each passing week. They're second in the AFC East right now with the tiebreaker over Miami, and it's going to be a bloodbath in that division. If the Patriots stay hot after they shut out the Lions 29-0 this past week, Miami and the Jets stay at it, they're all probably going to be looking up at Buffalo in the standings, but still, wild card spots definitely up for grabs. And for Coach Robert Saleh, the rhetoric he put out talking about taking receipts and speaking very highly and confidently about his young team when they weren't succeeding, he is now finally getting his first chances to make the rest of his skeptics eat those words. It's still early. There are still 11 games left to play for the Jets, but now they're 3-2 coming off a huge in-division win. That's everything you could have asked for Saleh and the Jets against the Dolphins. Now let's get to some other stories and headlines around the NFL. The big one coming out of Carolina, the Panthers firing head coach Matt Rule after Week 5's 37-15 loss to the San Francisco 49ers. Rule went 11-27 in his first 38 games with Carolina, and since he took over, that being the start of the 2020 season, the Panthers offense ranks bottom 5 in the NFL in points per game, yards per game, third down percentage, red zone touchdown percentage, and passer rating. For someone who was supposed to be an offensive guru coming over from Baylor, that's about as bad as it gets. Now, he hasn't ever really had a good quarterback to work with. That doesn't matter. 11-27 through 38, Rule is gone. The next team we're going to talk about is the Steelers, who got throttled 38-3 by the Buffalo Bills. Yes, it was Kenny Pickett's first ever NFL start. Yes, they were playing arguably the best team in the NFL, certainly the best team in the AFC, in my opinion, in the Buffalo Bills. So, yeah, getting beaten that bad is not necessarily unexpected, but for a Steelers team that still had a lot of talent, they could not have performed worse. And with the Ravens playing well and the Bengals and Browns able to at least do some things right every single game, the Steelers look on track for a last-place finish in the AFC North. And who could have ever thought that after what they had gotten in the Roethlisberger era, countless first-place finishes, and nearly endless dominance. And a couple other QBs we're going to talk about. In Indianapolis, the Matt Ryan era is off to a really bad start. Yes, he's averaging 275 yards per game, but just 5 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Was he actually an upgrade over Carson Wentz to bring in the offseason? So far, despite Wentz's lowlights with the Colts, it looks like it's a further downgrade. And lastly, let's talk about Chef Russ over in Denver. He's been off to a really bad start. 2-3, and the team really struggling, putting up just 4 field goals against Matt Ryan's Colts in Week 5 on Thursday Night Football. Is Russell Wilson really starting to decline that rapidly, or is new head coach Nathaniel Hackett way in over his head, and it's the coaching leading Russ and the Broncos to the bad start that they're on? When you compare Russell Wilson's stats to Geno Smith's stats, now his successor in Seattle, and you see how different they are, despite both teams being 2-3 and arguably past their primes, you just have to ask yourself, is it Russ or is it the coaches that's the reason the Broncos are struggling? We'll see how that pans out over the next few weeks, but let's move on to some baseball. The MLB Wild Card round, the first of its kind, came to an end this past Sunday when the San Diego Padres took down the Mets 2-1 in the only series out of the 4 that ended up needing all 3 games. We're going to try to bang these out quickly here to get to the division series predictions, so let's try to get it done 1 minute apiece for each series. Let's start with the Phillies-Cardinals series, and simply put, the Cardinal offense, it just didn't show up. Not to mention making things worse, their bullpen, led by their best reliever Ryan Helsley in the regular season, well, he ended up being the main reason they collapsed in the wild card round. Helsley giving up the 4 earned runs and getting just 1 out in Game 1 of the series. And give credit to the Philly offense. They only mustered up 9 hits in the whole series with no homers, but they sure were clutch in that 9th inning and did just enough in Game 2 to get past Miles Mikolas and the Redbirds. You gotta feel bad for Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina. In their final playoff games as Cardinals, they go out with a whimper. Now St. Louis has to wonder, what will Nolan Arenado do? Will he opt out? And will Adam Wainwright return for another year? We'll find out in the offseason. For the Phillies, Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler did exactly what they had to do, giving up no runs, 13 scoreless innings pitched with just 6 hits allowed and 10 strikeouts. They're going to need a lot more of that against the Braves because some key relievers on the Phillies, Jose Alvarado, Seranthony Dominguez, and Zach Eflin, either gave up runs or just put a lot of runners on base, did not have clean appearances in this series. That has to change against Atlanta because, like I said, Philly's bullpen depth is lacking and it cannot underperform against the Braves. And finally, in the Padres-Mets series, the Padres just outplayed them. In Game 1, they took Max Scherzer deep 4 times, led by Josh Bell, hitting the first of those 4 homers. And in the final 2 games, Juan Soto had 4 total hits. Those 2 guys really shutting me up after I was giving them shade for their bad performances in the second half with San Diego. Yu Darvish was exceptional on the mound in Game 1, and Joe Musgrove was practically unhittable in Game 3, so much so that Buck Showalter, in a desperation move, had him checked for foreign substances, and obviously there were none. Buck further showed that he had little confidence in his bullpen, having to bring in Edwin Diaz twice, not in the 9th inning. It seemed like there was nobody else he really wanted to go to at any point. And to make things worse, the Mets have a bloody offseason coming up where they could possibly lose Diaz, Chris Bassett, Jacob deGrom, and Brandon Nimmo. That's 4 huge pieces. An ugly end to their regular season and postseason could be met with a dark winter where they suffer nothing but further losses. Now, you may remember from the predictions from episode 1 that I took the Cardinals over the Phillies 2-1 and the Mets over the Padres 2-1. Safe to say, I couldn't have been more wrong on those. But I got both of them right in the American League, almost to a T. I nailed Guardians 2-0 over Tampa Bay, and for Seattle-Toronto, I had it 2-1 Seattle. They ended up doing it 2-0. We'll start with Cleveland-Tampa Bay, a pitching clinic of a series. Now, there's a positive and a negative side of that interpretation. Both pitching staffs were elite, but both offenses were absolutely horrible. It was just 2 huge hits from Cleveland. A 2-run shot by Jose Ramirez off Shane McClanahan in Game 1, and of course the walk-off by Oscar Gonzalez in the 15th off former Cleveland pitcher Corey Kluber to send them on to the ALDS. The Rays pitching staff did as much as they could. Kevin Cash kind of outmanaged himself in Game 2, misusing Drew Rasmussen, but he did get 5 innings out of Tyler Glasnow. On the Guardian side, remember that picture I showed you with the bullpen, all 7 of those guys, how good they were? They all proved it in the series. And so did Tristan McKenzie and Shane Bieber with how much I hyped them up. They played really well. The pitching did everything it had to do, and that's what they're going to need to take into New York against the Yankees. But we'll talk more about that series matchup in particular in about a minute. Let's talk quickly. Mariners, Blue Jays. The Mariners outplayed them. Luis Castillo in Game 1, 7 1/3 innings, 6 singles given up. That was it. Cal Raleigh becoming the king of clutch early here in Seattle, homering in Game 1, then providing 3 hits in Game 2. And Game 2 of this series is going to go down in history as one of the all-time playoff collapses. Toronto is up 8-1 in the 6th inning after they beat down on Paul Sewald and Robbie Ray. And remember, I told you about Robbie Ray. He shouldn't have ever started a game in that series. He did. Seattle almost paid the price for it. Were it not for Tim Meza, Anthony Bass, and Jordan Romano of all people, especially those last 2, leading the Blue Jays bullpen collapse and Seattle's eventual 10-9 win. Now, Andres Munoz out of the pen for Seattle was unhittable in this series, and the clutch hitting, like I said, from Cal Raleigh, from Adam Frazier, and the J.P. Crawford bases-clearing double, and of course the scary injury to George Springer and Bo Bichette. A wild Game 2, but Seattle came out on top. They filleted the Blue Jays, and now they're on to the ALDS against their division rival Astros. Now let's talk about Yankees Guardians, and let's start off with the Bronx Bombers, who we haven't had a chance to talk about yet in our videos. The Yankees went 99-63 and won the American League East. And their pitching staff for this postseason, their rotation is rock solid. Derek Cole, Nestor Cortez, Luis Severino, Jameson Taillon, all healthy, all ready to rock in October. Now with Cole, I know, he gives up a ton of home runs. It's a huge problem. No question about it. He gave up the second most home runs in baseball and the most in the AL, behind only Josiah Gray of the Washington Nationals. If he can keep the ball in the ballpark, and I know that's a pretty big if, then he still has some of the best stuff in baseball and gives you a ton of innings. Cortez and Severino both looked as advertised coming off their injured list stints. And Jameson Taillon, he's such a steady Eddie. He gives you 6 innings, 3 runs every single time with great control. He's not elite. He's not terrible. You know what you're getting. And that's a huge asset in October, knowing what you're getting. Now, when it comes to knowing what you're getting, on the rest of the Yankees, there's a lot of question marks, especially in the bullpen. 2 of their best right-handed relievers, Clay Holmes and Ron Marinaccio, may or may not be active for any point in the postseason. Holmes should be back, but maybe not for Game 1, and Marinaccio will be out until the ALCS at least. So that leaves the bullpen up to the leadership of guys like Jonathan Loaizaga, Scott Effross, Lou Trevino, and Clark Schmidt. That's not terrible, but it's not as great as this Yankee bullpen was when the season started. Furthermore, the left-handed relieving situation is even worse. Aroldis Chapman missed a mandatory workout because he would not be guaranteed a spot on the playoff roster and just unceremoniously ended his Yankees career. Have to say, with how he was pitching in 2022, this was a season-long coming. 4.46 ERA with about 7 walks per 9. Awful. But what do the Yankees have for lefty relieving instead? Their only for sure healthy lefty is Lucas Litke. Wandy Peralta could come back, but at this point, that's not guaranteed. And lastly, let's talk about the lineup. Yes, we know about Aaron Judge, but behind him, other guys need to step up. Josh Donaldson and Anthony Rizzo need to play better than the 220 hitters that they were. And we know about Giancarlo Stanton. I think he's the key to success. We know that in his playoff career, he is the face of this franchise, believe it or not. A 297 hitter with a 1.108 OPS and 9 homers. But Stanton has never entered October coming off a regular season this bad. He hit 211 with an on-base under 300. And he's been really struggling batting well under 200 in the second half. A few other lineup questions. Who's going to do a bulk of the catching? It was Jose Trevino, the all-star for most of the year, but Kyle Higashioka hit 339 with an 892 OPS in September. How's that going to work out? Where's DJ LeMahieu going to play? He might be an elite defender, but with his toe injury still bothering him, his power is non-existent. And Matt Carpenter is back, believe it or not. He broke his foot in early August, and he is back. Will he play every day? Will he be a pinch hitter? Will he even be as good of a hitter as he was before he got hurt? Who knows? There's a lot of questions with the New York Yankees this playoffs. The good news is they're going up against a Cleveland team they've handled quite well, but like I said, there's lineup concerns, there's bullpen concerns, and there may even be some culture concerns with what happened with Chapman. Going up against Cleveland, who was, as I said in last week's video, the hottest team in the AL coming off a dominant pitching series, well, we'll have to see how that goes. Now, here's a couple of things to note about Cleveland in this series. Yes, they went 1-5 against the Yankees, but Tristan McKenzie pitched a 7-inning, 1-run outing against the Yankees in the only game that they won, and Shane Bieber did not face the Yankees this year. Now, the Yankees have rocked Bieber in the past, including in the Wild Card round back in 2020. Aaron Judge and company rocked him in that game, but this is 2022. Bieber's a different pitcher now with a little bit less velocity and just as much break and more reliance on his off-speed pitches. Furthermore, for the Guardians, they went 0-3 at Yankee Stadium, where they're going to play the first 2 games and will play 3 out of 5 in this series if it gets there. The lineup, I mentioned it before in the first video. They strike out the fewest amount of times in baseball, and that wasn't really the case against Tampa Bay, striking out 26 times in the 24 innings. And there's a couple of hitters who need to wake up. Now, I know Cleveland's offense, there was none in the round against Tampa Bay. I know. But there were some guys who did especially poorly. Steven Kwan did not get a hit, even though he's one of the most exciting and underrated rookies in the league. Andres Jimenez went 0 for 5 with 5 strikeouts in Game 2. And really, there's nobody hitting. Jose Ramirez and Oscar Gonzalez had the home runs, but that was the entirety of the offense. If they don't hit, the Yankees' pitching is good enough and their offense is good enough where they can still get the job done. I think the Yankees have the edge in this series, don't get me wrong. They are the more talented roster on paper, but it's not going to be easy for them. They've had the 5 days off and all the question marks I brought up. I am taking the Yankees in this one 3-1, not 3-2. I think the Yankees will lose one of the games that Shane Bieber or Tristan McKenzie start, Game 2 or Game 3. But in all likelihood, they're going to face Cal Quantrill twice, and who knows what the Guardians are going to do, whether they line up McKenzie and Bieber for Game 2 and 3, or the other way around. But the likelihood is that those guys each pitch just once. Yankees, Guardians, the Yankees take it 3-1. So there you have it. There's my deep dive and breakdown of the Yankees-Guardians ALDS matchup. Again, I'm predicting Yankees over Guardians 3-1, and I'll give you my quick 2 cents on the other 3 matchups. The Dodgers completely manhandled the Padres this season, going 14-5 against them. I expect the Padres to pull off one win in either the game started by Yu Darvish or Joe Musgrove, but that's it. I'm taking the Dodgers in this series 3-1. In the American League Division Series between the Mariners and the Astros, I'm predicting a 3-2 series win for the Houston Astros. Seattle's pitching is unbelievable, and it's going to win them some games. The sad thing is, Houston's is even better. They have 4 starting pitchers, none of whom have an ERA over 3. That's unbelievable. Seattle will put up a fight, but fall to Houston 3-2. And finally, in our second NLDS matchup, Braves against the Phillies, I'm predicting another 3-1 series win, this one in favor of the Braves. Much like the Dodgers and Padres series where San Diego might win one game started by one of their 2 best starters, I think the same's going to happen here for the Phillies. They'll win one of the 2 games started by Wheeler or Nola. I just don't trust that lineup that put up just 9 hits in the first 2 games of the wild card round, and I really don't trust their bullpen. All told, there's your final 4 for MLB in the 2022 playoffs. Yankees beat the Guardians, Astros beat the Mariners, so we have another Yankee-Astro playoff series, and on the NL side, we have another Dodgers-Braves matchup in the NLCS. Should be a heck of a ride, and that'll do it for us here for episode 2 of 20 Minutes with Multz. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Once again, leave any comments down below. What do you think about my predictions? What do you think about my analysis? Great, bad, something else? All good. I want to hear it all. And once again, as always, like and subscribe down below. Until episode 3 coming out later this week, I'm Daniel Multz. So long, everyone.